Okay, it's time to have some talk about definitions and terminology. For the past few videos, I've tried to use simple terms, things that you don't have to be a programmer to understand. But when you have a technical interview, they are going to expect you to know the right word for some of the things that we've used in the past few videos. So I want to give you the right word for those so you're not confused in an interview or just if in case you need to do some extra searching about that term, I want to give you the right term for it. So let's talk about some definitions. I'm going to share my screen real quick. All right. So here I've written a function and I used the older syntax. That's because I need it to help you understand some definitions. So the first thing is that writing this right here is called declaring a function. When you declare a function, I told you that you can define some places where you can receive some input. When you define those, we call those parameters. So input one and input two, I've called param1 and param2. That is because when you define places for input to come into your function, you are creating parameters. So up here, it's called a parameter. When you put parentheses after a function, it is called calling the function or executing the function. The pieces of information that you put into the function, the actual real information, so where I'm putting a 1 or a 2, those are called arguments. A function takes arguments, stores them in parameters, and then executes it. So when you're defining the function, they're called parameters. When you're putting information in and you're calling the function, they're called arguments. So these are arguments. 1 and 2 are arguments. 3 and 4 are arguments. Param1 and param2 are parameters. Nothing has changed about how this function works. So just to be clear, this function still takes two pieces of input, does some work, and returns the output. In this case, it's taking 1 and 2 as input and returning 1 plus 2. In this case, it's taking 3 and 4 as input and returning 3 plus 4. So nothing has changed, but the definition of the word is that down here, these are called arguments. Up here in the definition of the function, they're called parameters. The next thing I want to talk about is the thing I've called shorthand functions. So if you wanted to create a function where you say, where you put the parentheses, you put the little arrow, and then you write, maybe you take A and B and you return A plus B. So this right here is called a lambda function or an arrow function. It's called an arrow because of this little arrow here. Um, but this is called a lambda function. So I called them shorter functions or shorthand functions in the previous videos. But if you're ever talking to an employer and they want you to use the actual term, this is called a lambda function. And occasionally in slang, it's called an arrow function. So hopefully that helps with definitions in case you have anything in an interview, you won't get caught by surprise.